Why UFOs? Operation Trojan Horse by John A. Keel. There is no plot to cover up the truth, but a sensible decision made by men whose minds have been boggled by just a glimpse of the overwhelming reality they encountered in their search for evidence to prove or disprove the existence of UFOs. We're now chapter 3, the world of illusion. There have been hundreds of incidences in which electromagnetic effects, such as the stalling of automobile engines and power failures, have been noted and documented. Early ufologists were already aware of the fact that electromagnetism played a large role in many UFO events. The late Frank Scully, a reporter for Variety, wrote a contactee-oriented book in 1950, Behind the Flying Saucers, which contained a long chapter on electromagnetism. Now we have enough data to properly interpret the overall meaning of this force in the phenomenon. We will try to simplify it here, going a step at a time before we outline the material which verifies these conclusions. Radio beams are waves of electromagnetic energy. They vibrate at various frequencies, and we separate them or tune them by adjusting the length of the waves with coils and condensers. Your local radio station is broadcasting a signal of electrical pulses, each pulse adjusted to a specific length. When you tune your radio to the station, you move a series of material plates which sort out the various wavelengths and enable your radio to pick up and amplify only the signal coming in at a certain point or frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum. Your eyes are also receivers tuned to very specific wavelengths of the spectrum. You turn the signals from those wavelengths into pulses, which are fed to your brain. Your brain, in turn, is also a very sophisticated sophisticated, little understood receiver. It is tuned to wavelengths far beyond the receiving capabilities of manufactured electric instruments. Most people are running around with crude biological, in quotes, crystal sets in their heads and are not consciously receiving any of the sophisticated signals. However, about 1/3 of the world's population possesses a more finely tuned instrument. These people experience telepathy, prophetic dreams, and other bizarre signals from some central source. If you are one of that 30%, you know precisely what I mean. If you belong to the larger ungifted 2/3, you probably regard all this as nonsense, and we may never be able to convince you. I might be in that two-thirds. Convince you otherwise. Now, let's try to define this whole process. When moving electrons pass through a wire, a small magnetic field is created around the wire. If the current fluctuates or vibrates, this fluctuation will also appear in the magnetic field. A voice speaking through a telephone mouthpiece or a microphone causes the current flowing through the phone to the fluctuate or oscillate. Your voice thus causes a flow of electrons to vibrate. At the other end, a magnet in the receiver responds to this fluctuation, and the minute vibrations are magnified. In thin pieces of metal in the earpiece is vibrated in turn by a magnet, and these vibrations oscillate the air in the form of sound waves, which can be sensed by your ears and auditory system. Technicians are undoubtedly gnashing their teeth over my explanation here, but again, I am trying to oversimplify these things. It is necessary to understand elemental electronics before we can move on to our next point. Your voice causes the electricity in your telephone to vibrate at a very specific frequency. When the metal plate diaphragm at the other end responds to the magnet, it vibrates at the same frequency and duplicates your voice almost exactly. A part of you, your individual voice, has been transformed into electrical waves, transferred to a distant point, and then resembled into sound waves, which duplicate exactly every inflection and nuance in your voice. This is a very primitive form of teleportation. The wire carrying your voice is surrounded by magnetic field, which is also vibrating at your own personal frequency. If there are, say, 20 phone wires on a pole, all the conducting signals, we now have the technology to tune a device to your personal frequency and interpret your telephone conversation instantly without cutting into any wires or tapping any lines. In other words, a panel truck carrying the necessary equipment need only park near a telephone pole bearing a wire hooked up to your phone. The operator can then tune in to your line and your personal frequency in the same way that you tune into your favorite radio program by adjusting the condensers, which cut out all other frequencies. This method of tapping telephones is absolutely indetectable. It does not produce any clicks or noises on your phone at either end. However, the process can be reversed, and the operator can tune into the frequency of your telephone line and talk to you by radio wave vibrating at the very low frequency of the telephone current. Now, mind you, this is a 50-year-old book. Or, if he so desires, he can insert static, strange sounds, etc. onto your line. He can even place phone calls through the telephone system using your line, and you will be blinded for them. Or excuse me, you will be built for them, not blinded. The equipment needed for this kind of tampering is most complicated and expensive. It is highly unlikely that any ordinary practical joker would be able to obtain or operate such equipment, but my studies, investigations, and nationwide polls prove that somebody is using such equipment or is exploiting these principles. The telephone companies themselves now utilize high-frequency radio for long-distance telephone calls. Microwave relay towers now dot the countryside. Man, it's even more complicated now, good God. Telephone signals are stepped up to high-frequency radio waves and projected from tower to tower across the country. In the past few years, there have been thousands of reports of low-level UFOs hovering directly above these microwave relay towers. Some researchers, such as Ivan T. Sanderson, have pursued similar reports and suggested that perhaps the objects were tapping the power from power lines and telephone systems for their own purposes. I do not feel this is a valid theory. Rather, I now believe that the UFO phenomenon is primarily electromagnetic in origin and that it possesses the ability to adjust beams or of electromagnetic energy to any given frequency, ranging from ultra-high frequency UHF radio signals like those of the astronauts to very low frequencies VLF, which can be picked up only by special equipment, to very, very low frequencies identical to the magnetic fields surrounding telephone wires or the outputs of public address systems in schools and churches. I also believe that this same phenomena is flexible to an unbelievable degree. It can create and manipulate matter through electromagnetic fields above and below the range of their perceptions, range of our perceptions and our own technical equipment. The phenomenon is mostly invisible to us because it consists of energy rather than solid earthly matter. It is guided by a great intelligence and has concentrated itself in the areas of magnetic faults through history. It makes itself visible to us from time to time by manipulating patterns of frequency. It can take any form it desires, ranging from shapes of airplanes to gigantic cylinder spaceships. It can manifest itself into seemingly living entities, ranging from little green men to awesome one-eyed giants. But one of these configurations is its true form. The UFO sighting data confirms this theory, but we lack the necessary technology to prove it conclusively. Energy and illusion. Any high school student of physics can tell you that our reality is an illusion. All occultists have been saying this same thing for centuries. All matter is composed of confined energy, tiny moving electrons and energy particles from atoms of varying weight and densities. These atoms are joined together to form molecules of specific substances. They are so tiny that the atom remained only a theory for many years. We cannot perceive the atom, but but now can prove scientifically that it exists and that it is made up of energy. Atoms and molecules form larger structures, and even though they do not touch, if we could reduce ourselves to the size of an electron in an atom, the next nearest atom would seem like a distant star. We are so much larger than the atom that a collection of atoms seems to form solid matter to us. This page seems solid to you, but it is made up of billions of atoms. So are you. If you're trying to poke your finger through this paper, you will tear it. But you can easily poke your finger into a cloud of cigarette smoke because its molecules are further apart. We learned to reshape molecules. What the hell just happened? We learned to reshape molecules long ago through chemical and physical manipulation. We can melt a bar of steel and mold it into a sword or a plowshare. We can cut down a tree and build a chair out of it, or a piece of paper. Such manipulations are primitive processes, but our industries and science have been built around them. Now we are beginning to learn how to manipulate energy itself. We started by finding ways to peel electrons off atoms and release the basic energy hidden in the atom. We naturally applied this important discovery by melting cities and disintegrating human beings. Because this is nuclear bomb you're suggesting. The chair you sit in is composed of billions and billions of molecules made up of atoms. Each cell of your body is also composed of millions of atoms. If the energy patterns or frequencies of the atoms of your body were radically different from the atoms of your chair, it is conceivable that they would intermix and you would sink right through the chair, somewhat in the same way your finger passes through a cloud of cigarette smoke. Our reality is based entirely upon what we can perceive with our physical senses. If we can touch something and feel it, we say that it is real and exists. If we can see it, smell it, hear it, taste it, then we know definitely that it exists. But actually, you may be sensing only a small portion of the existing universe. That this very moment you are surrounded by a wall of electromagnetic waves from dozens of radio and television transmitters. You cannot see or sense these waves, but you can transform them into movements of air with a radio receiver. You have the instrumentations necessary to perceive waves which exist beyond the limitations of our sensual perceptions. There are other waves around you. There are other waves around you which you cannot detect. There are thousands of microscopic life forms in a drop of water. You can't see them, feel them, or taste them because they are too small. A teenage boy can, with a cheap microscope, can peer into a drop of water and invade the privacy of those microbes. But the microbes do not know he is there. They swim about in their liquid environment totally unaware. that their tiny world is actually an insignificant part of a much larger and very different whole. Our world may also be part of something bigger, something beyond our senses and abilities to comprehend. The bigger something is that bigger something is undoubtedly made of energies too, but energies of a different frequency, forming atoms radically different from the atoms of our own world. These energies could coexist with us and even share the same space without our becoming acutely aware of them. The evidence we have outlined in this book does clearly point to this unperceived coexistence. And now we must come to terms with it, or them, or the great what's in the sky. Secrets of the spectrums. For thousands of years, the occultists, spiritualists, and religionists have talked about and written about auras, frequencies, vibrations, and other planes of existence. Each group developed its own complex vocabulary for explaining and defining these things. Each tried to fit its theories into its own particular frame of reference. Thus, these other planes became the Valhalla, where worthy spirits ascend upon death. The casual browser leafing through this mountain of literature is usually repelled by the nonsensical terminology and the abstract theories. Yet, underneath all of the belief-ridden folderol, I'm not even saying that right. Folderol, the belief-ridden folderol, there lies a thread of truth which is now being verified by the many manifestations surrounding the UFO phenomena. I will try to demonstrate that the UFO entities are directly related to the entities and manifestations involved in religious miracles and spiritual seances. There are many thousands of published messages from both the UFOnauts and the spirits, all which employ the same techniques for bearing information, deep and simple-minded descriptions about life on the other planet or planes. One of the most important correlations is that many of these messages have discussed in depth the existence of another reality which is formed by energies operating on another frequency or vibratory level. There has also been a great deal of discussion about light and rays of light. The lore of the seven rays goes back to the most ancient of times. The Bible's book of Revelation repeats the number 7 in many ways, and the 7 sisters and the Pleiades, 7 stars in the sky, form an important part of this ancient lore. The color spectrum is also most important in the context of the overall picture painted by religion and occultism. God and Christ are the light in most of this literature. The source has made repeated attempts to explain all of this in terms that we might understand. On January 8, 1968, Mr. Orion of the Ashtar Intergalactic Command passed this message along to a contactee. The saucers which you speak of as such are in reality the space bodies of certain aggregates of consciousness. They exist dimensionally. That is, they penetrate both the third and the fourth dimension simultaneously and can, if they wish, confine themselves to either one of these. Their purpose has been and still is, for the time being, to interlace these two realms of consciousness which are seemingly separate. However, the time quickly comes when the veil is torn aside and what is one to perceived is perceived as one. So we try this again. So however the time quickly comes when the veil is torn aside, what the time quickly comes when the veil is torn aside and what is one is perceived as one. Okay. It is at this moment that the saucers seen by a few will be seen by many. It will appear that they have suddenly arrived in your skies in great numbers. In reality, this is untrue, for in reality they are where they have always been, but man sees with new eyes. Man's old eyes aren't very good. We can actually see only a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Light waves are really visible vibrations of the spectrum, somewhat akin to radio waves. The different frequencies register as different colors on the cones of our eyes. You could say that your visual apparatus really consists of thousands of tiny radio receivers carefully tuned to a minute portion of electromagnetic spectrum. We really can't see very much at all, but we can see enough to cope adequately with our independent environment. The accompanying chart is a rough outline of the basic electromagnetic spectrum: cosmic rays, high-intensity, high-frequency rays of energy which radiate throughout the universe, occupying one end of the spectrum. They are followed by potent gamma rays, the energy forms which do not do so much damage when we set off our atomic bombs. Did I say don't? They are the okay, let's try this again. Cosmic rays, accompanied by the chart, is a rough outline of basic electromagnetic spectrum. Cosmic rays, high-intensity, high-frequency rays of energy which radiate throughout the universe, occupying one end of the spectrum. They are followed by potent gamma rays and energy forms which do so much damage when we set off atomic bombs. Next, we have X-rays, short waves which penetrate matter, ionized gas, and cloud of photographic film. These blend in with gamma rays on our scale. Ultraviolet rays comes next, and they are tremendously important to the UFO phenomena. These are also invisible but can burn the flesh and eyes. A neglected part of the UFO evidence consists of hundreds of sightings in which the witnesses suffer all of the symptoms of conjunctivitis, afterwards. Actors performing on a movie set, brightly illuminated by arc lights, sometimes experience this same symptoms. Their eyes redden, itch and feel sore. This is caused by the ultraviolet radiation, also called actinic rays. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Actinic rays. These same rays give you the sunburn on the beach. Actinic rays. Okay. You do not cover your eyes when lying on the sand. If you don't cover your eyes while lying in the sand, you can burn your eyes from the sun rays. Many cases of skin burn and conjunctivitis following nighttime UFO sightings give absolute proof that ultraviolet waves are radiating from some of the objects. Stars and space satellites and other natural or man-made aerial objects could not possibly produce this effect. I have interviewed many people shortly after their sightings. I wondered about that last statement. I think they can do that now. I think they might be able to do that now. When the eyes were still swollen and reddish from the conjunctivitis, I suffer this ailment myself after a close sighting in 1967. Okay, I can get back to this recording. I know very few of you are going to even watch this, but I strongly recommend that you do some of your own reading, not just watch videos. That's just my opinion, for whatever it's worth. I'm going to go back to this paragraph. In the many cases of skin burns and conjunctivitis following nighttime UFO sightings give absolute proof that ultraviolet waves are radiating from some of the objects. Stars and space satellites and other natural or man-made aerial objects could not possibly produce this effect. I have interviewed many people shortly after their sightings, when their eyes were still swollen and reddish from conjunctivitis. I suffered this ailment myself after a close sighting in 1967. The visible light is sandwiched in between 5 and, I guess, through 5 and 6 on the scale. 5 and 6, so from 5 to 6 on the scale. This is the only portion of the spectrum which we can see and utilize. These visible rays are divided into the basic frequencies of blue, yellow, and red. When combined, they form white. Interesting. So these visible rays are divided into the basic frequencies of blue, yellow, and red. When combined, they form white. Beyond red, there is infrared, the visible rays radiated by heat. Many UFO witnesses have complained of feeling oppressive waves of heat, even when the objects seemed to be many yards away. Concentrated infrared can also hurt the eyes. Infrared rays are shorter than microwave radio signals and longer than waves of visible light. Man-made radio signals are last on the scale, and of course things have changed since then. These range from microwaves to UHF, slightly, I guess. Yeah, slightly. It's changed. Things changed a little bit, right? With new technology in the past 50 years. Ultra high frequencies on one end, and VLF, very low frequencies, on the other. The Van Allen belt, a belt of radiation circling the Earth and the atmosphere, strain out from the strain out most of the cosmic rays which are constantly bombarding us. Ultraviolet rays, which are constantly bombarding us, the ultraviolet rays and infrared. Let me try this again. Okay. I said that wrong. The Van Allen belt, a belt of radiation circling the Earth and the atmosphere, strain out most of the cosmic rays, which are constantly bombarding us. The ultraviolet and infrared rays of the sun penetrate this barrier, formulating and plant and animal life have adjusted to absorb and utilize these energies. And as a graph here, visible light, color spectrum, ultraviolet light, invisible, can burn skin and eyes, and all the way down to radio waves. So ultraviolet lights, then there's violet, blue, bluish green are cyan, green, yellow, red, magenta, purplish red. Then it says here in the ultraviolet spectrum to the cyan or bluish green, UFO entry field. From the red to magenta, purple red, to infrared, invisible, heat waves, and radio waves is UFO departure field. Okay. If our eyes were tuned to see beyond the infrared rays, we could look at a telephone microwave relay tower and see a steady stream of brilliant reddish light pouring from it. If we were tuned in visual to the long radio waves, we could see ourselves bathed in multicolored lights. Because of the many different frequencies, it would be like living in the end of a rainbow. We are surrounded by energies we cannot see. It is possible that some of these energies form objects, entities, and even worlds that we cannot see either. But just because we can't see, hear, feel, or taste them doesn't mean that they aren't there. Let's recap this basic lesson in physics. 1. All solid matter in our environment or reality is composed of energy. 2. All energies are of an electromagnetic nature. 3. The human eye can perceive only a very small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. 4. Electromagnetic waves of many different frequencies permeate the known universe. We live in a sea of such radiation, and the space through which our planet travels is an ocean of radiation. In recent years, specially equipped satellites and our radio telescopes have discovered that space is filled with infrared rays of unknown origin. Invisible stars have now been detected by infrared devices. They are invisible because they do not issue rays within the limited frequencies of the visible light spectrum. Instead, their energies are being radiated in the higher frequencies of X-rays and lower frequencies of radio waves. Thanks to the excellent work now being done on radio telescopes all over the world, we are rapidly learning more about these invisible objects. It is extremely unlikely that these radio signals are being deliberately broadcast to us by a superior intelligence. Somewhere in this tangled mess of electromagnetic frequencies, there lies an omnipotent intelligence. However, this intelligence is able to manipulate energy. It can, and quite literally, manipulate any kind of object into existence on our plane. For centuries, the occultists and the religious have called this process transmutation or transmogrification. So transmutation or transmogrification. Thousands of books have been published on this process, many of them serving as secret texts for alchemists and sorcerers. The early occultists understood, at least partially, that energy was the key to the whole. Since fire has always been a basic source of energy, many of their rites centered around candles, flames, and bonfires. Early religious rites involved the offering of sacrifices by fire to the unseen gods. In biblical times, animals were consigned to the flames as offerings. In other cultures, human beings were sacrificed on pyres. Essentially, fire breaks down the molecules of the substance being burned, freeing some of the energy contained therein and producing intense infrared radiation. One well-known, heavily documented type of poltergeist, quotes, noise ghost manifestation produces a mysterious fires. Haunted houses often burn to the ground eventually. Fires of undetermined origin erupt suddenly throughout UFO flap areas. Many pyromaniacs set fires because, quote, a voice in a quote in their head told them to do so. Although I have had neither the means nor the time to study adequately and confirm this fire factor, my experiences in flap areas have led me to believe that the energies of these mysterious conflagrations are being utilized by the UFO phenomenon. There may be a definite relationship between the number of fires and the number of UFOs seen in a specific sector. That's very important. What he just says, there are definitely relationship between the numbers of fires and the numbers of UFOs seen in a specific sector. That's a very important line. A community is suddenly beset with 15 or 20 major fires within the short
span of a week or two seems to produce more UFO sightings in that same period than a place with no fires. Either the UFOs are somehow indirectly causing these fires, or they are directly feasting upon the energies produced by the flames. The mystery of the aura. You are a chemical machine made up of electromagnetic energy. Your body is actually an electrical computer connected to all parts of your body by a wiring system of nerves. Constant chemical reactions are taking place throughout your body. The food you eat is being burnt off continuously in the form of heat and energy. Although you can't see it, your body is surrounded by self-generated fields of radiation. The occultists have always called this radiation the aura. There have been many people, mediums and sensitives, who have claimed that they could actually see this human aura. Some amazing demonstrations and tests have been performed before large groups of witnesses in which sensitives were able to look at a stranger's aura, and by supposedly noting various shadings in the aura, they could accurately announce, quote, "You have a scar on your abdomen," or "There's a black cloud over your liver. You've been having liver problems," end of quote. Special eyeglasses have been on the market for years so that almost anyone could see the aura. I didn't know about that. Did you guys know about the special glasses in the market? Okay. Since the human body does radiate infrared, the glasses do work. In recent years, science has begun to take the aura seriously. The Albert Einstein Medical Center in Philadelphia has been conducting experiments with infrared devices for some time, with surprising results. They have, for example, photographed a man's arms and hands with the devices before and after he smoked a cigarette. The after shot showed how his arms were darkened because of the nicotine that constricted the blood vessels and lowered the temperature in his arm and his limbs. Tumors and other disorders readily show up in these thermogram photos. See Scientific American, February 1967. These studies have confirmed the wild claims of the occult aura watchers. The Biomedical Engineering Center at Northwestern University Technological Institute have also been experimenting with an ultrasound system which has produced similar results. A hand dipped in water agitated by a special sound transducer device reveals blood vessels as green, blue, or orange lines. It even works with metal. A spot of defective welding appears in varying colors, while a good weld is uniformed. What has the aura got to do with flying saucers? Perhaps a good deal. Many contactees have been told that they were selected because of their aura. Occultists have long claimed that each person is surrounded by an aura which reveals his spiritual state. An evil person has a black aura. A saintly type has a golden radiation. There are supposed to be blue auras, and white ones is also, all with their own meaning. Here again, the literature on aura is massive, and not all of it is nonsense. A milkman was walking along a beach south of Sydney, Australia, early one morning in the summer of 1960 when he came upon a strange metal disc surrounded by a violet light. Not violent, but violet light, and making a whining sound. Two men suddenly appeared, both dressed in spacesuits, complete with transparent helmets. Their eyes were blue and had an oriental slant. They allegedly addressed the milkman in perfect English, although their lips did not move. He said their voices seemed to come from square boxes on their belt. After warning the milkman that entities from Orion were preparing to take over the Earth, they said that they had been able to contact him because of his aura. They promised to return and contact him again at some time in the future, stating that he, quote, was going to be used for a certain job, end quote. This witness told no one about his alleged contact for 2 years, but finally his story leaked out and he was investigated by Colin McCarthy and other Australian ufologists. A more detailed description of this case can be found in the Trojan Mystery by Elaine Buckle. So, Trojan. Since many animals have better vision than men, it is possible that the UFOs and the UFOnauts may also have superior vision. They may be able to perceive frequencies of electromagnetic spectrum which are invisible to us. Perhaps they can even see the entire spectrum and can clearly view not only our unlimited world, but the more vast invisible world which surrounds us. There have been numerous confirmed radar sightings of UFOs which could not be seen by the naked eye. We also have the thousands of soft sightings in which the objects suddenly appear and or disappear instantly in the front of a witness. All of these events seem to prove that a large part of the UFO phenomenon is hidden from us and is taking place beyond the limited range of our eyes. We can only see the objects and entities under certain circumstances, and perhaps only certain types of people can see them at all. Thus, by all the standards of our sciences and our common sense, the UFOs do not really exist as solid objects. They may be a constant part of our environment, but they are not an actual part of our reality. We cannot therefore catalog them as manufactured products of some extraterrestrial civilization sharing our own dimensions of time and space. They are extra-dimensional, able to move through their spatial coordinates at will, but also able to enter and leave our three-dimensional world. If this is a true hypothesis, then they may also be operating beyond the limitations of our time concordance. Our years may be minute to them. Our future may be their past, thus they have total knowledge of things in store for us. The purple blobs. Among the most neglected of all the soft sightings are the strange purple blobs, some so faint that they can barely be seen with the naked eye. Such blobs are frequently reported in the earlier days of the saucer scare, but newspapers were soon diverted from the more intriguing hard sightings of seemingly solid discs. The purple blobs have been busy throughout the world, but the published sightings have become increasingly rare. People who see these things often dismiss them as some kind of illusion or natural phenomena, but they feel they are not worthy of being reported. Between 9:15 and 11 p.m. on the night of June 24, 1947, scores of people in Seattle, Washington, watched peculiar purple and light blue spots of light dancing around the sky. I filmed them too. That was the same day that Kenneth Arnold saw his famous flying saucers. I have seen many strange blue lights and purple spots in my travels. The first time I was roaming around the hills behind Gallipolis Ferry, West Virginia, early in 1967. And when the spots first appeared, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. They were barely visible in the darkness and seemed to be small clouds of glowing gas. I climbed a steep hill and, accompanied by two local teenagers, hoping to find a better vantage point to view the sector where many objects had been sighted previously. The purple spots were moving all around us. There were 20 or more. The sky was overcast, and at first I suspected a phenomenon might be caused by stars faintly shining through the clouds, but they seemed very close by, manufacturing around a treetop level. It's not manufacturing, maneuvering around a treetop level. I blinked my huge flashlight at them and was startled when these things actually leaped out of the way of the beam. And it's interesting because I'm filming a lot of these blue circles, purple circles, and they're associated with the trees. All right. When we reached the summit of the hill, I experimented further, aiming my light at spots which had remained perfectly stationary since we had first noticed them. The instant my beam struck them, these spots skirted across the sky, some of them darting 20 to 30 degrees before they paused again. After much more experimentation on other nights in other places, I had concluded that the purple spots were parts of the UFO phenomenon and were being controlled by or possessed by some kind of intelligence. Let me try this because that doesn't make any sense. After much more experimentation on other nights in other places, I concluded that the purple spots were part of the UFO phenomenon and were being controlled by or possessed some kind of intelligence. Okay. Not being possessed, but possess some kind of intelligence. Return now to our two charts of electromagnetic and color spectrum. You will see that the ultraviolet rays immediately precede the visible spectrum. The first visible frequency are purple or violet light. Let us assume that UFOs exist at frequencies beyond visible light, but they can adjust their frequency and descend the electromagnetic spectrum. Just as you can turn the dial of your radio or move a variety of condensers up and down a scale of radio frequencies. When the UFO's frequencies nears the visible light, it would first appear as a purple blob of violet. As it moves further down the scale, it would seem to change to blue, and then to cyan, bluish green. In our chart on meteors, we note that they most often appear as bluish green objects. I have therefore classified that section of the color spectrum as the UFO entry field. When the objects begin to move into our spatial and time coordinates, they gear down from the higher frequencies, passing progressively from ultraviolet to bluish green or cyan. When they stabilize within our dimensions, they radiate energy on all frequencies and become a glaring white. In the white condition, the object can traverse distances visibly, but radical maneuvers of ascension and descension require it to alter its frequency again. And this process produces new color changes. In the majority of all landing reports, the objects were said to have turned orange, red or yellow, or red before descending. When they settle to the ground, they solidify. They begin to glow red again. Sometimes they reportedly turn a brilliant red or vanish. Other times they shift through all the colors of the spectrum and turn white, and fly off into the night sky until they look like just another star. Since the color red is so closely associated with landing and takeoff processes, I term this end of the color spectrum the UFO departure field. The great mass of observable data fully supports this hypothesis. Our glowing objects change color, size, and form, and this fact indicates that they are comprised of energy which can be manipulated to temporarily stimulate terrestrial matter. Such energies must be somehow collected together at the invisible frequencies, and then frequencies changes are brought about to lower them into the visible spectrum. Once they become visible, they can then organize themselves into atoms and produce any desired form. Barney and Betty Hill, a couple who were allegedly taken aboard a UFO in New Hampshire in 1961, first observed a brilliant moving star. As it drew closer, the brilliance faded and it became a seemingly material flying saucer occupied by small men in uniforms. Brazil's Villa Boas, who claims he was taken aboard a UFO in 1957, first saw the reddish object, which then became the grounded saucer. When it took off again, the object first surrounded itself with a red glow. The glow intensified and the reddish objects sailed off into the stars. Those who have tried to investigate the UFO phenomena in purely physical terms have speculated on the possible mechanics of such objects. The general consensus has been that UFOs utilize an anti-gravity device which surrounds them with a magnetic field, and this magnetism ionizes the nitrogen in the air around the object, causing it to glow. On the surface, this has seemed like a plausible theory, but in reality it is not workable. The tremendous amount of magnetism would be required to produce the magnetic effects blamed on the objects, such as the stalling of automobiles. The Ford Motor Company, working with the UFO investigating group in Colorado University, discovered that simple magnetism could not stall an auto engine encased in the protective steel body of the car. A field strong enough to accomplish this would also be strong enough to bend the car itself and possibly affect the passengers as well. Continuous ionization of the air is also a difficult feat. It is more likely that the objects are composed of electromagnetic energy themselves. Witnesses are observing frequency changes rather than ionization. In some cases, the ground has been found radioactive after an object has landed. This might be the byproduct of the gamma rays, which are one of the energy constituents of the objects, and not just an effect of some mechanical process. We also have a considerable body of testimonial evidence in which the objects are transparent, even though they appeared to be mechanical in some way. For example, at 7:30 p.m. on Friday, October 18, 1968, the McMullen family in Medulla, Florida, looked outside their home when their dog began to howl and bark. They reportedly saw a purplish red object hovering about 10 feet in the air. It was completely transparent. The two normalized men and two normalized men were visible inside it. A strong odor of ammonia was in the air. The two men were pumping a horizontal bar up and down. As they watched, the 30-foot sphere slowly descended and flew off. not descended. The 30-foot sphere slowly ascended and flew off. A few minutes earlier, 2 other witnesses saw a bright light rising from the grounds of Mandula School, just north of the McMullen's home. There were also some mysterious explosions in the area during that period. Was this transparent sphere a spaceship from another planet? Not very likely. The witnesses saw nothing inside it except the men and the bar. No machinery. No wonderful apparatus. There have been many bewildering accounts of shell-like objects with no visible means of propulsion. No signs of any kind of technology. Contactee Reinhold Schmidt, whatever it is, German-speaking UFOnaut. I can't ever say it. UFOnauts. So contactee Reinhold Schmidt, German-speaking UFOnauts, who invited him aboard their saucer in Nebraska in 1957, did not walk but glided across the floor in their spaceship as if they were on roller skates. Other sober and baffled witnesses have described how the UFO occupants seemed to fly from the ground to their waiting saucers. Still others have claimed that the UFOnauts simply walked through the sides of their craft like ghosts. In story after story, we have testimonial proof that the objects and their occupants are not made of normal substances. The hard, seemingly solid objects are another problem. Bullets have been fired at them and have ricocheted off. They sometimes leave imprints on the ground where they landed. If they are the product of superior intelligence with an advanced technology, they seem to be suffering from faulty workmanship. Since 1896, there have been hundreds of reports in which lone witnesses have stumbled onto grounded hard objects being repaired by the pilots. In flight, they have an astonishing habit of losing pieces of metal. They have to be ill-made, always falling apart, frequently exploding in midair. There are so many of these incidences that we must wonder if they aren't really deliberate. Maybe they are meant to foster the belief that the objects are real and mechanical. In the foregoing, I have tried to demonstrate how the soft objects seem to be directly related to the electromagnetic spectrum. Spiritualists and religious been telling us about frequencies, vibrations, and the color spectrum for centuries. But modern researchers such as Dr. Meads Lane worked all of this out years ago. Dr. Lane evolved a theory of, quote, mate, or and quote, demate, materialization and dematerialization of extra-dimensional objects. His findings were privately published and not very widely circulated. Others, such as the British ufologist Harold T. Wilkins, also worked this out and published a book about it in the early 1950s. But the spectrum theory lacks the strong emotional appeal of the extraterrestrial thesis. This is a rather curious entry in Project Blue Book Report number 14, 1955, on page 295. In this section showing how various sightings are classified, number 8 in code 79 through 80. Final identification is, quote, electromagnetic phenomena, end quote. This is crossed out. The report was reproduced by photo offset. And now well-known classification is of unknown was substituted. And that is end of chapter 3. That's a good place to stop the recording. And the next chapter will be machines from beyond time. Very interesting book. It makes a lot of sense to me with my research. Ties right in. I didn't even know this was going to be the case. I guess I had a bit of a hunch, but I didn't know how much this book made sense. I've heard a lot of good stuff about this book, even though it was written 50 years ago.